All right, welcome everybody to this webinar. I see some people joining in right now, which is great. My name is Jonathan Greachin. I am a co-founder of the Founder Institute, and we got a great topic today that I know is going to be very relevant to a lot of the people in our audience, and it's about not only how to find, engage, and sort of close advisors and board members, but also how to lean on them in times of change, in times of struggle, or even in times of growth. And I think we can all agree that right now is definitely a time of change, no matter what type of business that you're in. So really quick, the Founder Institute is the world's largest pre-seed startup accelerator. We're currently enrolling in over 70 cities around the world. Literally right now, we're enrolling in more cities than we ever have been in our history. Because even though the economy may not be doing so hot, times of change are great times for entrepreneurs. So if you want to learn more about FI, go to fi.co, and you can also see all of the programs that are enrolling at fi.co/enrolling. Okay, so today here we have probably one of the most active Founder Institute mentors, I think, that we have ever since day one, ever since we started doing this back in 2009, Madeline Duva. Madeline, it's great to see you. And usually when we were not in in sort of this quarantine reality that we live in now, I used to see you a lot more often at the various Founder Institute events. Right. But Madeline, do you want to introduce yourself and kind of give a quickly on your background?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Really glad to be here. Super fun. Thanks for inviting me, Jonathan. And so my background, I've been in the Valley longer than I care to admit, and came out of, after grad school, I was at Fidelity Investments and built a customer service system there. And before there was the lean startup, I was kind of going out and actually talking to the users of the system, because we were building that internal customer service system. And I was like, the thing we were implementing was going to pull down the company, and I went bananas. And so I was like, no, we got to talk to the people who are going to use it, or they're not going to use it. So just flew out to the, phone sites and talked to everybody, and we built it from that perspective. So really come from a product lens and a product management lens, moved out to the Valley and started a little spin out of SRI. And we built handwriting recognition. We were at the beginning of pen computing, so that gives you a little bit of my age there. And so, that was a company that was around for a long time. I was there for a very long time, raised a bunch of money for them. We did a Chapter 11. We came back. We had $1 billion market cap. It was a wild ride. And then from there, I went to a little company that got bought by that company. But I got out again. And then just mostly had done startups. And the last time I was a CEO, I did a company, it was called China Mobile Soft. We built a complete Linux platform for mobile phones before Android, and sold it to PalmSource, and then was advising companies for many, many years, and swore I'd never do it again, never be a CEO again. And one of the many companies I was advising is a company called Flux, FLUXX.io. We service the nonprofit sector, so foundations and nonprofits. And it's a grants management system. And so I'd been advising them since 2011. And in 2017, the board asked me to step in. I said no. The founders then asked me to step in, and I said yes. And I'm still there today. So,
and that's an interesting segue too, because we brought Madeline on this webinar because she's an advisor to a lot of companies, right? And that's super interesting. I didn't know that you were an advisor to Flux before you became the CEO and all that. So that's super interesting dynamic in that. And yeah, some of the other companies that Madeline's been an advisor to, Drop, Splashtop, Tracker, iFi, and just a ton of other companies throughout. It's mostly Silicon Valley, right? Or are you advising companies in other locations?
I've done other, Drop is in Ireland. So okay. I've done definitely some in other, I was working with Fatigue Science for a while up in Canada, and then another company that over in Europe that does plastic, kind of really trying to look at how do you minimize that usage with a really interesting way of infusing it to get these nanostructures in there, so you're using less of the plastic. So a lot of different companies. And then I've been over to, with FI to Moldova and Kazakhstan. So super fun.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat here. Well, it's about to say it's international, and now there's languages in here that I don't understand. So there you go. That's a pretty good indication we have an international audience. But thanks everyone for joining. And as I was mentioning before, the topic here that we have today is how to find and also how to lean on your board members and advisor to build out your company, and especially in times like these, which can be classified as interesting times. And we're basically going to break this down into 2 topics today, okay? And the first topic is going to be kind of the basics of advisors and board members, how you might find them, what the benefits are, how you want to communicate with them, those types of things. But then I really want the meat of this to be really about how, as an entrepreneur and as a founder of a company, that you can lean on these board members and advisors to really help you get through these tough times and to just help you get to where you want to go, to help you build an awesome company. So for everybody that's in the chat, kind of the best thing about a webinar is our interaction with you in the chat. Okay, there's tons of videos on YouTube you can go watch and all that kind of stuff. Like, we're here because we want to answer your questions. So please, at any time, throw your questions into the chat. We have a member of the Founder Institute team that's in there right now. She's probably talking to you at the moment, and she's going to be serving up and queuing up all the questions for me that I can ask Madeline, and we'll weave them into the conversation. But please, at any time, throw your questions in there. We're going to get to as many as possible. And really, the whole point here is that we want to help you with your specific questions. So please don't be shy. Get your questions into the chat. Okay. So the first topic that we have here is sort of the basics of advisors and board members. All right. So as I said, Madeline does this with a lot of companies. She's been doing it for a long time. And obviously she believes in the process because she's now the CEO of a company that she just first started off as an advisor to. Like, what would you, Madeline, advise companies, what are the biggest benefits? Why should they be seeking out these types of relationships, especially in the earliest stages?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the board side, one of the things you got to be careful about is you can easily get a new VP of engineering or another, swap roles out. You can swap your advisors out, but board members are hard to get rid of, right? So when you get a board member, you want to make sure it's a good fit for you. So that's a very different relationship because you essentially report into the board. Typically board members come on, you want an outside board member, but typically they're your investors. And so when the investors, you want to make sure that's a good fit for you. And that's super important because they're not easily removed. And so that relationship, don't just tell investors or tell people what they want to hear. You need to tell people what is really going on. Otherwise you're going to end up, saying, oh, this is what they want to hear. This is how I'm going to get their money. And you're going to have divergent goals. And that's going to be very problematic for you as you go forward. Advisors are a little bit different. I've been a board member. I've been an advisor, both. And sometimes I don't want to be on the board because there's a fiduciary responsibility as well. And people need to understand that. But as an advisor, it's really about, when you're looking at them, do they know something in your wheelhouse? What do you need? If you're the idea person, but you're not a coder, maybe you want someone with some technical skills. Maybe you're a coder and you've got some really great ideas, but you need somebody to help you on the marketing side. So you need to figure out where are your strengths and be really honest about that, what your strengths and weaknesses are, where are your holes and gaps, and look for people to help fill and fill that gap and fill that hole.
Right. So basically rounding out your team, especially as an early stage entrepreneur where you're probably not going to have a ton of money to start just hiring the best of the best people, right? So having advisors on your team is a way where you can still access some of that value without having to pay like amazing people like a crazy amount of money, right? And as far as what about like sort of the opening the doors and the strategic relationships, right? Because a lot of the companies that we talk to when they're definitely filling in skills gaps Right. But let's say you're building a type of company where you need specific access to different markets, whether it's for sales or BD or something like that, right? You're probably going to want to be trying to identify some people that can open some of those doors as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I had a fair amount of experience in kind of channel and, kind of retail and those kind of things as well. And so when, with Drop and kind of looking at how do you find the people, what do you need to do, right? Are you a consumer product? Are you going to be in the channel? Are you a mobile product? Do you need someone with mobile expertise? Where, if you're, are you selling to the enterprises? It's really about the connections and the network that they have. And that's part of what, as an entrepreneur, you need to be doing is building your network. And it's super important because it's those connections, and it's also two-sided. You want to be super helpful because there are people that I helped 15, 20 years ago. And, with Drop, there was an issue. We had an issue with a chipset, and a person who used to live in France that I had worked with, I'd helped him get a job in the US, and now he was working at Qualcomm, and that was a chipset we were using. So I was able to pick up the phone and call and said, I need some help on this. Here's my problem. And I got directly to where we needed to go. Those kind of things are, they seem small, and it's somebody can do something in a half an hour that would take you months to do because they have those connections. So that's really what you want to look for, is building that network yourself, but also, making sure the people that you are looking to help you have the connections into the places where you need to go, depending upon your, skill set and depending upon what market you're going after.
Right. And we're getting a lot of great questions. So this is great. Everybody, please keep those questions coming. We're lining them up here, and we're going to start getting to them in just a moment. But, as far as looking at the benefits, let's flip to the other side, right? So you're an advisor to a lot of companies, and clearly you just shared with us that the benefit was not so that you could become the CEO of a company, because that was something that was not in the initial game plan. So what is, what's the benefit for you on the other side? Because that'll obviously be a super relevant, viewpoint for the entrepreneurs to see.
Yeah, and I think that's important because a lot of times advisors are looking for their next jump, and I was not. Like, I had been a CEO, I had a good exit. I was like, I'm done. I just want to help other people. I was super lucky, and I wanted to pay back. And it was not something I was looking to do. And but it was again, the board came, and then the investors, not the investors, but the actual two of the founders were like, would you step in? Would you consider stepping in? And I was going to do it for a short period of time, 3 to 6 months. And it's now 2.5 years later. So be careful. So, and I love what I do, and I love my clients, and my team is amazing, and all of those things. So that's wonderful. But, as a mentor, I learn as much from the entrepreneurs than they're going to learn from me. And what I always tell people is, it's your network as well of the entrepreneurs that you work with. And that's why something like FI is so important, because you get to know, your cohort. And you can be sitting there going, okay, I'm working on this. What are you using to, how are you checking in on your employees? How are you, what HR products are you using? What, are you using Trello? How are you using Slack? What are the best, best of breed in X, Y, and Z? So that you're going to learn more from that cohort, I think, than you're going to learn from mentors, but mentors can help point in different directions. So I learn a ton from the people that I interact with, and it's just super fun to impact a business. When years later someone will be like Zeev at iFi was like, do you remember that conversation where we were sitting in that restaurant and it was raining, it was it was leaking in there, and you told us this? And I was talking to them about founder equity and how do you do it, and what do you have to think about, and what is your strategic direction? And it's like, he goes, I always pay that forward. And so and then that makes you feel good. Like I positively impacted the way he looked at his business, and then the way he's gone on in his career. And I think that to me is like super rewarding.
Yeah, no, I hear you with that too. Like, I think it's also, maybe, at least for me as a advisor and as a mentor, it's a lot of, sometimes it's the challenge a little bit. Right. I guess there's that saying that, the best way to really internalize something is to teach it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And there's a lot of times when in my head, I'm like, yeah, this is clearly the right way to do things. But then when I start advising other entrepreneurs to do it, I'm like, oh crap, I'm not doing this myself, right? So I think there's a lot of value there, and definitely that sort of getting that intel from the front lines, so to speak, on how things are going is super valuable as an advisor and as well, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard to remember to take your own advice, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, when you're working with an advisor, don't ask them to solve the problem for you, right? Like I always tell people, I don't have any of the answers, quite frankly. I just have a lot of questions. And questions are much more important because they'll help you get to the right answer, because everybody's coming at it from a perspective. And, I have my perspective. Somebody, Adeo has his perspective. John has his perspective. And we may tell you different things because we're looking at it from our lens. And so you have to be able to take that information, sift it, and figure out what lands for you. Don't ask anybody else to solve the problem for you, but just, really kind of concretize those things. And also don't ask them to boil the ocean. People are like, what's the best, pricing strategy? And I'm like, well, what kind of market? I mean, there's so many questions that go around that. So that's not really a good question. To really hone those questions down and really understand, what are you trying to learn? And what do you, there are no shortcuts, right? And so what are you trying to glean, and what are the pieces that are important to you, and narrow that down and focus on that instead of these very general kind of uber questions that really aren't going to get you anywhere.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent here. Then we'll start to get into how to find and engage the advisors. But yeah, it's a super interesting point, because I see this a lot too. There really aren't. There's no like startup experts. Okay, the best we can do is pattern match. So you're probably going to get, like, if you go to an advisor and you're just like, hey, just tell me what to do and I'll do it tomorrow, right? Like that's not going to be an advisor relationship that's going to last very long, right? Like they're going to want to understand, hey, here's the problem that I'm having. Here's like what some people have told me to do. Here's what the research I've done online seems to point to. Like, what do you think? Right? Because again, like they're, as you said, like there's no shortcuts, right? There's never going to be one way to do it. And the ways to do it are going to change, especially in times like now, on almost a weekly, monthly basis. So it's about, it's gathering information and, really trying to engage your advisors in a discussion, a strategic discussion that's interesting, right? Versus being like, I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do. Right.
Yeah. And I think it's also sometimes just getting, like, people would ask me, when I was working with a lot of CEOs, like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, a lot of times I'm just getting the hamster out of their head, right? Because you start to spin on something and you're freaking out about this, or, oh my God, I can't pay anybody, or what do I do about that? And you perseverate on things. And so I would try and kind of really like look at that hamster and try and get them to understand what is the problem you're really trying to solve, and then trying to help them walk through it, not with the answer, but again, asking a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Nobody has there is no one right answer. And that's what you got to be careful of. And it happens a lot, and you can see it. Someone will talk to one investor and they say one thing. And so then you jag down that path. And then somebody else says, well, you should do this. And you jag down the other path. But I mean, I've had cases where one of the companies I was advising, we were building kind of a YouTube meta cafe type of thing, but these guys weren't consumer people, right? So I was kind of always cocking my head, super smart. I'd worked with them before, really liked them. But then what happened is, we were going and talking to people, and everybody kept coming back to, wow, what I really love about this, we were able to do interstitial ads. And this was before interstitials were, the thing. Right.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you guys, nobody gives a shit about all this stuff you're doing. They care about this. This is what you should think about focusing on, because if not, you need to go get a different team because you don't have the consumer experience to build that. So think about it. And we ended up actually focusing on that piece, and they ended up selling, to Millennial Media. So, again, really thinking about what are you doing and what are you doing well. And sometimes, you're going, and that's the thing I always say is you got to focus on the problem. Don't focus on your your solution, because either that or you're going to keep trying to jam it into some little hole and it's not going to work. But if you really understand the problem or the challenge that your clients are facing, then you can kind of go in and go, okay, and then they're going to teach you what it really needs to shift into. And then that's when you're going to end up with product market fit, versus saying, I built this thing and they're going to love it because it's incredible because I built it. And it just doesn't work that way. And when you let your product out in the wild, they do stuff you never would think they're going to do with it. And you're going to learn so much more about it. That's why you got to get the hell out of the building and talk to your clients, talk to the people you're trying to target.
I couldn't agree more. It is my go-to too as an advisor, when I'm always like, they'll start talking about all this stuff and I'm like, okay, let's bring it back to the basics. Like the problem you solve for the customers. What?
Right.
Okay. The ways that you're trying to market to them are X, Y, and Z. There's some kind of disconnect, right? All that kind of stuff. But okay, we have so many questions here, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are being very patient. So let's start getting to some of these questions. So Tim was asking, and this is sort of segmenting also in like how you start to find the advisors and engage them is, so Tim's asking, how do you organize advisors? How do you find advisors when it's just you and all you have are some ideas?
Well, I think part of it is, following the right people, who's interesting, who's writing interesting stuff, try and engage people. You got to go to networking events, a little harder in the age of COVID, but try and get involved, whether it's a webinar where they're having offshoots of that. That's why something like Founder Institute is very helpful, because there are mentors built into that. And then you're going to hear from folks to get feedback. But it's about building your network. It starts small. I mean, I've got over 8,000 people in my address book, and I cull that thing. But ever since I was younger, like I would write it down, and people would be like, how do you know that you met me in, 19 whatever, and 1920, and because I write it down. Like, when did I meet that person? Did they make an impression of me? Right? And that kind of stuff is important. Just, and then you connect with them, and don't just like blindly connect with people on LinkedIn. Have a reason and ask them like, hey, John, I read this article. It was really interesting. I'd love to follow you. I'd love to be, in your network. Somebody's more likely going to respond to that than if you just hit I listened to their thing, boop. And a lot of people connect. I don't, because if I don't know the person, then somebody asks me, who's this person? And I'm like, I have no idea. So I can't make a recommendation or connect people because I have no, basis on which to do that.
Right.
So it takes work. Building your network takes time and it takes effort, and you just got to put it in. It's not a simple thing.
Yeah. And now too, as well, without physical events, I mean, this is what we tell a lot of our companies to do is, even on Hootsuite, right? It's free product. You can set up filters. So whatever industry you're in, you can just set up filters and then start to see like search terms. Okay. Are you working in SaaS for hospitals or something, right? Like you can obviously come up with some search terms. You could start to see the different people that are talking about it, start to follow them, start to engage with them. Will be a much cleaner LinkedIn request or cold email if you're already engaging with them on some other platforms or something.
Yeah. And also try and be helpful to other people. There are two types of people in the world. They're givers and they're takers. And if you're just going to be a taker, people aren't going to want to work with you. Like all you're doing is like, when people send me a note, hey, I'd love to pick your brain. I'm like, oh, one, I hate that term. And secondly, what do you mean you want to pick my brain? Like, do you have anything to offer me? You've never even met me. And you're like, hey, I'd love to pick your brain on this.
Pick your brain and get a cup of coffee. Two things.
Like,
don't ever use
those. I don't have time to get a cup of coffee. I have barely time to breathe. Right? Yeah. Like I do this because I've been doing it forever, and I love the Founder Institute. And it's, I've done stuff in other countries, but a lot of it right now I just can't do because I've got a full-time job. I loved it before because I had so much more time to spend with people in the class. I just don't have it. So be relevant to people. I mean, before there was all the, you have so much more at your disposal now. But I used to be reading magazine. I'd read an article and then I'd send somebody a note and say like, I read this article, it was super interesting, blah, blah, blah. Like, be useful, be an asset to somebody, and then you will build that reputation. But if you're always taking, it's really difficult.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm seeing a couple questions in here too, and we're going to get onto sort of the relationship between advisors and the entrepreneurs in a second. But a couple of people have been asking and I know this probably varies, right? But is there a magic number is what Jen's asking of advisors. Uday's asking like how many are too many,
it depends. I mean, a lot of people, sometimes you'll go to a website and there's like 50 advisors. And it's like, seriously, people? Or, I mean, even a friend of mine, there was one time it was kind of a consumer product. He had an advisor on it. And I went in on the platform and one of the advisors wasn't even on the platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, cause you could follow people. And I'm like, seriously, like you got to get these people engaged. So, don't. And the other thing is, I mean, I was at a show one time and I was walking around, I forget where I was talking to this company. It was a consumer. I've done a lot in, physical products like connected devices. People call them IoT. I hate that term, but connected devices. And I was looking at this product and I gave them, a bunch of feedback and they were like, will you be our advisor? And I'm like, I just looked at them. I'm like, you don't even know, don't fall in love that quickly. You don't know me at all. And you're asking me to do something. You're asking a commitment for me and you're going to commit to me. And that just makes no sense. Get to know people, understand if that makes sense for you and if that connection makes sense. So I just think there's, it's relationship building. And again, people feel like you don't have time, but if you don't have time to do that, you're never going to build your business because it's all based on those connections that you will, that you're going to make and then use over and over again that, 10 years down the road, I have people helping me on something that I helped them years ago. You do it because you want to be helpful. And some days it comes back to you. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it comes around 5-10 years later.
Right. So that was a red flag. And Tim had questions here. Any red flags to consider if somebody's asking you to be an advisor? So if it's somebody you just met at an event and they're immediately offering you equity, that's probably a red flag.
Yeah.
What about, other things like if they're not open to feedback or something like that you think would be red flags?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that's super important is that people be coachable. I mean, there are a lot of very bright people out there with a lot of really good ideas, but good ideas will only get you so far. It's about execution and everybody needs help. And I mean, I need help. Like, and I've been doing this a long time. And
I need help too.
If you don't realize that, then therein lies the problem, because then mentors cannot help you, right? And you also have to be able to be vulnerable with your mentor. Like, I'm struggling with this, or I'm depressed about this, or this is really challenging. What do I do about that? And it might be, I sometimes have been asked by VCs to come in and counsel a CEO out of a job, right? Because he's not the right person to do it, and I'll go in there and just ask a series of questions about what they like to do, what do they want to focus on, because as a CEO, especially as the company gets larger and you have investors, even at Flux, the founder, there are 4 founders and, the CEO, great, incredible product guy. But I was like, you got to manage your board. You got to always be networking. You got to manage people and you got to manage a budget. And some CEOs want to learn how to do that, that come from product or whatever. Some don't. And if you don't, then get a COO or get a CEO and be the product person or be something else in the company, right? At Drop, Ben really wanted to learn all that stuff. And he's done a really good job and has scaled up at it. But those are not simple things to do. And it takes you away from, if you really want to code, be honest with yourself about what you're good at, what you want to learn, what you don't want to learn, and what you're not interested in. Because, being a CEO, it's a great title, but it's a shitty job.
I don't want to be CEO of Fetters too. I'll just throw that out there. So
I swore I'd never do it again. Here I am.
So a couple questions first about, so there's been a lot of questions about like equity splits and things like that and the real mechanics. So let me forward people to a resource that we have, okay? fi.co/FAST, FAST. It stands for Founder Advisor Standard Agreement. or standard template, sorry, that was the acronym, fi.co/fast. And actually we've released, and we released this many years ago. Basically, it was just, it's a free document that we created with some lawyers in Silicon Valley where people can basically check, okay, this is how much work we're doing, this is how much equity that you'll get, and make things very simple for advisors and entrepreneurs to engage. And because obviously the legal part can be pretty intimidating, I know. And Madeline, you mentioned you've actually used that agreement yourself too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Okay.
easy. It just makes it, somebody doesn't have one, it's like, if they have one, great. If not, that's just an easy, and it also gives you kind of criteria of why you would give someone more. And that's super helpful, because some people will be like, hey, I want 5% of your company. It's like, seriously? Like, what are you going to do for me?
Right.
And there are cases where, I've been in an office a day a week for companies as an advisor. There are cases where it's a cup of coffee once in a while, right? It really depends on what people need, what people are looking for, and, kind of the level of effort, and also the level of interest on my side, right?
Yep, for sure. So for anybody in the chat that's interested in really kind of the mechanics of it and the legal side, which, is less interesting, and so we're not going to talk about that here, but go to fi.co/fast to get into some of that stuff. So, but into here, you started to get into a little bit of, that you want some of the entrepreneurs that you work with to be vulnerable, and you want them to be sharing with you some of the challenges that they have, or whatever. Stephen asked, I think I may be bugging my advisors too much. How can I gauge that? And maybe also just to kind of piggyback off Stephen's question, like, yeah, I mean, what is the right amount of communication, and what are the types of things that you want to be hearing from the entrepreneurs that you're advising?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, FAST can help you kind of with the amount of,
Yeah.
The level and amount of time. One, you should always think about writing kind of a letter to your advisors or friends or interested parties in the company. Even if you meet somebody and you like them and you're like, hey, John, I know you don't want to step on as advisor, but I'd love to just keep you, posted on what my, progress is. And most people are going to go, sure, right? It's not that hard for me to say, yes, you can have that. Then, as I look at it, it's like, oh, hey, so-and-so should talk to so-and-so. So you get top of mind from people. So it depends on at what pace you're working, but monthly is not a bad idea, at least quarterly, to kind of, like I do a quarterly talk to our clients, the state of flux. We talk about what's going on at the company and kind of keep them updated. So it really depends on the cadence. It depends on the relationship you have with them. And then be prescriptive. Like, what are you trying to get from them? Don't waste their time. Hey, I just want to pick your brain. Like, no, why do you want to take that person's time and then take that time? Like, hey, John, I need 15 minutes of your time because I'm struggling with this.
Right.
Can you help me with this?
That's an easy thing to say yes to, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Like, not a hard thing to do. But you got to also, it is important to be vulnerable, because if you are struggling, being a founder is very tough. It's a very difficult thing. It's super lonely as a CEO. It can be very depressing. Some days you're going to feel like $1 million, and the next day you're going to feel like I'm going to kill myself or kill somebody else. Neither of which is a good option. So, that kind of labileness that you have as an entrepreneur, it can be very, very tough. And so it's important to take care of yourself, and mental health is not something that people talk about a lot, but it's very important to kind of have routines. I get up every morning and I work out, right? So at least I've accomplished one thing in the day. If the whole thing goes to hell, at least I worked out. So if you have these little things that you can do to accomplish, because you're going to have good days and bad days. And, I think people will take time to do it. And it's not a hard thing to ask, but you do have to don't ask them to boil the ocean for you. Don't ask them to solve problems. But it's like, okay, you have a CTO and maybe he's not doing what he needs to do. How do you fix that? Or your VP of sales is not hitting their numbers. What do I need to do? How do I find a replacement?
Right.
Just really kind of what are those blocking and tackling things you need to solve, and how are you going to solve them? And then ask people, or I'm I want to go into retail, and how am I going to go about that? Right. And I could say, hey, you know, you should talk to these people up in blah, blah, blah that know Amazon really well, and what have you. And I mean, I have a company I work with, Forever Splash Top. And, you know, at the very beginning, I was their mobile advisor, right? But it was like 2005, 2004, it was still a little bit before kind of the iPhone and whatever. And he's like, when? And I'm like, no, don't do it. You know, we were just starting with iPhone, and I was like, don't do it. You're not ready. He's like, you're my mobile advisor. I'm like, I'm giving you good advice, because you're going to spend, you know, especially early days of Android, you know, you were building so many iterations of it. It was super expensive. Android people weren't spending money on stuff. It was like build for iPhone only, but you're not even ready to build for iPhone because your customers aren't going to know, you know, it's not going to make sense. And then a ways later, I called and said, now's your time. This is now, you got to start to focus on mobile. But it's really about, don't just jump on the trend that you see coming. You got to really think about where's the bang for the buck for your client. You know, mobile
Right.
now is everything. So that's a different story. But when it was coming on, it's the same thing with AI, or these, you know, people have these buzzwords, or blockchain, or Bitcoin, and how am I going to do? And it's like, wait a minute, does that really have relevance for your business today?
Right. For sure. And I'm seeing here too, is Jen Wong was saying, no brain picking. That's going to be my post-it note. I'd throw no coffee into that too. But I think, to sort of sum it up, it's, you know, everybody's busy, right?
Yeah.
And advisors are going to be busy, just like investors are going to be busy, and journalists are going to be busy. And, you know, I come from a marketing side, right? So it's like, what's your call to action, right? Like, what's your ask? Like, and yeah, the more specific you can be on that, then the better off you're going to be, and even the better response rates, and the more helpful it's going to be for your business, right? So getting through some of the other questions here, Thomas had an interesting question, like, how do you fire an advisor um, without burning bridges? You know, to be honest, I haven't seen too much of that myself. But I don't know, maybe you have a different take on it, Madeline. Just
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, again, you got to enter a relationship with caution. You know, I mean, I've had so often where people, like, I've worked with people for a while, and they're like, wait a minute, but you've been, you know, there's my COO, actually, her husband has a startup, and I was working with him, you know, he was in one of my classes at Highway 1. And, it was really funny because I had no idea that they were married, because I knew her in her maiden name before. And then, you know, one day he was home and saying, you know, Madeline this, Madeline that. And she's like, who? And then we realized that we were all connected. But he wanted me to be an advisor, and I kept saying no. I'm like, no, I'm already helping you. Why do you want to give me shares? It's like, I don't want the commitment on my side. So be careful when people are like, you talk to them and they're like, sure, I'll sign up as an advisor. When they're too, you know, it goes both ways. When somebody wants, you know, me to be an advisor, and they don't even know me, you know, you've met me for 5 minutes and you're like, will you be my advisor? It's like, wait a minute, you don't know anything yet. Just slow the hell down. And vice versa. If someone's like, I want to be an advisor, I can help you, you know, give me 2% of your company and blah, blah, blah. Hold on a minute. Like, show me the money, like, show me the value. I always like to, I mean, I worked with iFi for a long time before I stepped in as an advisor, and they were like, come on. And I was like, you know, and I love those guys, and I'm still friends with all of them today, right? In their different companies now. But, you know, again, it's about building that relationship, right? It's not just networking, it's building that relationship. So don't be too quick on either end, and then you're not going to get in a position where you want to fire them. But when you have an advisor, you have shares, and they vest on a monthly basis, right? So you can kind of say, hey, you know what, this isn't working out. And be honest and straightforward with people. Like, you know, I don't feel like you're interested, and I feel like we're not getting a lot of it. I think it's probably time for us to part ways. You know, want to remain friends, widow, you know, I'm happy to help you anytime, blah, blah, blah. But just be
yeah,
really
I agree. A lot of times it's pretty natural, right?
yeah.
You know, if you go into doing building some of these relationships, not with the expectation of like, oh, I need you to prove to me that you're a valuable advisor. Like, no, it's just like you're getting some advice, right? You're probably providing some value as well, whether you know it or not. Maybe it's just the perspective that you have or the interesting idea that you're pursuing, which may be something interesting that this person hasn't seen before in the industry, right? If you're just approaching in the beginning as advice, discussions, business discussions, just like interesting conversations, right? Over time, I think the advisor thing starts to surface itself fairly naturally. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times it'll just be like, so maybe we should like formalize this. You know what I mean? It's not like, hey, want to be my advisor? Here are the terms. You know, it's like you said, it's a lot about the relationship building. So Govinda asked the question here, is there a platform where we can look for industry experts to find advisors in a specific industry? And I'll take this one, Madeline. There is, and it's called Google. Okay. Google.com. And to a lesser extent, Twitter, LinkedIn, anywhere else, right? Like there are experts in your industry. There are people that are thought leaders. There are people that are badass salespeople, badass tech people, badass policy people, whatever, right? Google, honestly, especially as like a first-time entrepreneur, I've always told people it's your best friend. Like if you know how to Google well and find information, you're gonna get a leg up and have the patience to go through Google to find information because it's pretty much all there. But after that, you know, the finding them is not the hard part, as we've been trying to say. Like it's the building of those relationships, right? So we're going to segue now into how to lean on advisors and board members during hectic times, which now could definitely be classified as that. So, you know, what are some of the ways that you're working with some of your companies now? Are there like common things that they're coming to you with, or, you know, just right now we're going through a massive upheaval of everything. What role do you think advisors and, you know, can play, especially right now, you know, depending on the types of businesses?
Yeah, I mean, it really varies. I mean, I'm on a CEO Slack thing with a bunch of CEOs that, you know, from Canvas, which is one of our investors, so that VC, and also with Felicis, and you know, so they've had these kind of talks where everybody's on there and just kind of riffing about, you know, what their challenges are. You know, it's like a safe space to talk about what you're freaking out about and what you're not freaking out about. So, and it's funny, I've had a lot of texts from people going, can I talk to you about X, Y, and Z? So, you know, people will call me about, you know, somebody texted me the other day, can I talk to you about leasing, you know, the lease, right? Because we also lease our building. What are you doing? How are you doing it? I'm like, here's a really good, you know, he had just signed a 5-year lease at $74,000 a month. And I'm just like, okay, holy shit, let me give you the name of somebody.
That's a lot.
He focuses on tenant, you know, rights, and he works with tenants and only, you know, he's a broker, but he works with tenants and he can help you. So again, you know, I have no knowledge about that. But
right, you're not a self-proclaimed lease expert, but it's just
somebody reached out to me, but I'm like, I know somebody who knows about that, right? Because you build those networks, and that's part of it. You know, people are like, oh, brokers, they don't mean it. Brokers are super important when you're looking for space, right? You know, and I've used them in different areas, and then if you need help, you reach out to, you know, one of my VCs is in my building, so I was like, hey, you know, what are you guys doing about this? Do you have any ideas on this? So, you know, again, it's really about that network and finding people with that network, right? And so, you know, a lot of things that I've been helping people with, I mean, a lot of people are stressing out because they're having to let people go, or they're reducing salaries, and that's really stressful. You know, a friend of mine had to let go of some really talented people, and that's a huge bummer. It's a disappointment. You know, you care deeply about your team, and you don't want to have to do that. You know, knock wood, I'm not in that position. But, you know, it's, that's a very important thing to kind of, how do you do it humanely? How do you do it well? How do you do it with respect? You know, how do you help people keep intact? Because when you lose your job, that's a terrible thing. Even if it's in a pandemic, you're still going to feel like shit. And you don't want to do that to one of your teammates. So helping them through that. You know, some of the business stuff, people are just, you know, some of my folks are, you know, they need help reaching particular people. So again, they're it's about, again, connection. It's about connections. So, but a lot of it has been just kind of, leaning on the shoulder and, both of us kind of going, this isn't super fun. Right. And
So it seems like it's a little bit like anything and everything you can help with, if they're able to reach out to you and sort of be vulnerable about it and just be honest, right?
yeah. And I think that's super help, if you're honest with people and you do show that vulnerability, people are going to, most people are going to try and help you.
Yeah.
But like with my board members, I'm very specific, right? Like there are certain ones that I go to, like Michelle, I go to when I need stuff on sales and, revenue and those kind of like, how am I going to approach this? What should I be budgeting against? She can be brutal, but she's incredible, right? And then for Paul, I go for, specific things, and for Sandeep, I go for others. And then sometimes I need all of their collective thing because it's a board issue. And it needs to be voted on by the board. But sometimes, some people, one's more of a product person, one, again, one's more on the finance side. So really kind of figuring out who's going to be your best person to go to. And sometimes you go to both, right? Because you
Right.
need to get a different perspective because you're really struggling with something and how am I going to solve this problem? But likewise, just, as an advisor, one, you just want to be there for people because especially in a time like this, it's super tough. It's just,
Yeah.
everybody's got home challenges, just even looking at my team, most of my team is doing great being remote, but people who have really small children, now they're a parent, you're a mother or father, you've got a full-time job. Now you are a daycare person and you are a school teacher. I mean, it's a bit of a nightmare. And so I'm really trying to pay attention to those people. And if you have a team, talk to those teammates about it. Check in how people, be human, right? Ask, I'm talking to every single person in our company and saying, hey, how are you doing? No, seriously, like, how are you doing? Do you have what you need? Are you feeling supported by your manager? Do you feel like your coworkers are there for you? Like really trying to make sure these people are okay. Because these are the team that, you're shoulder to shoulder with, and you got to get through this mess with. So, don't forget to be human.
And we were just discussing a related topic too, leading just in the couple minutes before we went live here, where, yeah, I think there's, and I think this is inherent with most entrepreneurs, right? Like you always want to project a level of positivity and confidence, right? But I also think it's super important to be able to be honest with people. And what I was telling Madeline before was that, we've had some companies, some Founder Institute alumni that we thought were doing fine, and we had checked in with them, and then all of a sudden we get an email saying that they're dissolving the company, and we're like, whoa, like what happened? Why didn't you reach out to us? Maybe there was something that we could have done to help, and a lot of times, it sort of is this, it's sort of this entrepreneur's plight where you always have to be quote unquote killing it. And, and it is important to if you don't have relationships that you've built where you're comfortable, sharing those types of vulnerabilities and problems, and you probably haven't built the right types of relationships, right? Especially, and I think advisors specifically fill a role there that probably something that you can't tell even some of your employees, that you can't tell your board members, that you can't tell your investors, right? The advisors kind of fill this gap where they're sort of they're in this sort of safe space, right?
Yeah, and hopefully you can do that with your board too. I mean, I'm so fortunate to have the board members that I do. Like it's, I've been on boards where people have screamed at people. I'm telling you, be careful. I saw at one point a question popped up. It's like, don't board members get voted on every year? No. If you're a public company, yeah, but it's still, you're never going to be able to remove them. The reality is, these are your investors. When you have a board member from an investor, I can't swap one of them out. I'm just super fortunate that I have great ones. And, I knew one of the, the chairman of the board, I knew, that's why he asked me to step in. Right. So I knew him for a long time ahead of time. And then we brought someone else on the board. And then one of the co-founders is also on the board with me, and she's fantastic. So, I feel very fortunate in that, but it's true. you do, as the leader, you need to be positive, but you also need to be realistic and honest and transparent with your team. And you have to be careful about too much transparency. And I'm often guilty of that. And that can make people unnerved, right? So it's a very fine balance about that, and you do have to be the one, because you're the leader. You got to get people to follow you. You've got to show the passion. You got to show the enthusiasm. All of those things are super important. And you can't lose sight of that, but you do have to have somebody that you can go to and go, shit, I'm failing. Like, I feel like I'm doing a terrible job. And like, how do I do this better? Because you can always improve.
Yep. And I think a lot of times too, it's a lot of those interpersonal decisions as well. I think the kinds of things you can't really Google, right? But okay, so last call for questions, everybody. We got a couple more minutes here. Please keep them coming, and I'm gonna go through a couple quick questions here. So we had a couple of questions. So here was it. Sorry, it was, how do you know if you're getting good advice? Or how do you know, or I think actually the question was phrased as, what if you're getting bad advice? And Kaiser asked, how do you know if you're getting bad advice? And is there any, I saw that, it piqued my interest because I'm like, do you have any thoughts on it?
I think sometimes, again, remember, everybody's got a perspective, and everybody's got an agenda, and it's not yours. And so you have to remember what lens somebody's coming from, right? So, an investor may want to look at, okay, I want to just get my money out, right? Because it's a pandemic. And so maybe I want to sell the company, but it's too early. Or maybe somebody's saying, so again, listen, and you've got to learn to actively listen, to understand what the question is, repeat that question, really understand, like, if you don't understand the question, say, hey, John, what are you really trying to ask me here? Help me understand. I'm not really sure I understand that question, and try and keep clarifying it. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think, and then when people are giving you advice, again, don't grab that advice and run with it. Does it land for you? Have you heard that before? Listen for the patterns. But people miss stuff. Even some of the best investors in the world. I mean, Bessemer Venture Partners, I have so much respect for that firm. It's one of my favorite firms. Those people are incredible, and they've done really, really well. If you go to their website, it's B as in boy, V as in Victor, P.com. They have the anti-portfolio, and they show you all the things that they totally screwed up on, like not investing in Google. Like Dave Cowan was like hiding and trying to get out of, what's her name's house because she didn't want to talk to them, right? So everybody makes mistakes. Nobody is perfect. If we were perfect, we'd have that crystal ball and could do it, So remember, everybody's got a perspective, and everybody's got an agenda. Figure out what people's agenda is first. And, are they trying to run your company? I was never most people wanted to work with me as an advisor because I'm not interested in running your company. This one, I was kind of pulled into it. And again, happy to be here, but it was not something that I was actively looking to do. In fact, I did Jason to get a CEO or a COO and had no intention of it. But really listen to what people are saying, and does it land for you? Don't just because somebody's smart and somebody's been super successful, they could have been, so much of it's luck. So, luck.
And they may not understand your market as well as you do.
Right, exactly.
They probably don't.
They probably don't.
Yeah. So there's never a end all be all. And I think that's, you want to get as much feedback as possible, right? If somebody's an advisor and you've engaged in a relationship with them, then obviously you value their feedback more than others. But it's still, you want to temper that, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So here's an interesting sort of little bit of a contradiction that's going on here. So I'll say the first part. So Thomas is asking, from my experience, it's important to find the right advisor. Finding the wrong one can cause big damage. Beware of any advisors seeking compensation. They always suck. So that's what Thomas is saying. And then on the other side, we have Steve, who is an advisor, who is saying, I'm an advisor. I want to advise and work on projects, but I also don't want to be an unpaid employee. Is it appropriate, expected for an entrepreneur to expect unpaid labor provided by the advisor, right? So you're sort of looking at it from these two respects. I have my opinion of these two sides, but I don't know if you want to tackle that, just.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, oftentimes I've spent time with people and because I don't want to commit to you. I'm happy to take a look at something, give somebody some feedback, but don't expect any more with that, right? Like, and I've done that, a lot of times I've worked with people for a long time before I become an advisor, just because I'm very particular about who I want to work with, and are they coachable? Are they people that I want to work with?
Right.
Again, stuff goes wrong, and you want to be in a boat with people. And this is why, again, board members are super important. Like, people will take money from anybody, and then you end up with these board members that you may not like. It's when the seas get rough and you're in the boat and you don't have a paddle and water's coming on and you all stink, you start to see the mettle of a person. When stuff is going well, it covers over many ills. So you want to make sure that you like these people. And so that's why I don't just jump into, working with somebody. I might help somebody just because it's interesting and whatever. But no, you should compensate people. Like, either they get shares in a company, because if they're helping you, that one introduction can change the course of your business. So, just because it takes someone a half an hour when they've got 10, 20, 30 years of experience, don't underestimate that. But then again, if people are sitting there going, hey, I want 5% of your, I'm going to introduce you to these people. It's like, well, then you can do it on a, that's a more shystery, right, thing. And so you could say, hey, look, if you deliver that, I can give you this, right? So if you want it to be transactional, but it shouldn't be transactional. It should be something that, hey, I like this person. This person helps me think. And that's part of it, is like, you are doing a lot, and, you're constantly doing. And if you don't take the time to think, and what strategy and where's the tip of your arrow and how you're going to get there, and that person can kind of help you go, hey, have you looked around this corner? Have you thought about this? What about that? So advisors that are asking a lot of questions, I would say, are not really good advisors. If they're telling you what to do, they don't know what to do. Nobody knows what to do, right? I mean, yes, there are certain things like, no, you want to do price testing, right? You don't just want to, you think if it's cheaper, it'll be better. No, there's a, asymptotic, the value curve, right? So if you price it too low, people don't think it's worth anything, right? And if you price it higher, you'll actually get more customers. So you're leaving money on the table, but you can do some of those tests, right? So again, I think you do have to value people. And if you don't give somebody any value, like, why should they value you and spend time with you?
Yeah, I agree. And it goes both ways here. And it's, especially if, for example, let's say you wanted to raise funding, okay? Having people being able to show, hey, these people are my formal advisors in this business. Okay. And these are awesome people, right? Like, I'm a company that's going to be a SaaS company, and
Right.
I found this person who was head of sales for a SaaS company that killed it, right? And this person feels that it was valuable enough of their time to sign this agreement with me, and I gave them a pithy amount of future value, which is going to be worth nothing for a very long time, if it ever is, right? Like, that's an indicator to investors that you're doing something that somebody else that knows the space really well feels is valuable. Right. And again, it's something that can be reevaluated over time as well. So yeah, I do think Thomas feels differently for sure, but I don't think, now if somebody's just coming up to you being like, hey, I'm not going to talk to you unless you give me 3% or whatever, different
No.
story. Okay.
Don't talk to that person.
Yeah. But what you should always do, and what we've been sort of advocating here, is sort of a try before you buy, right? It's like, build a relationship, start working with them, start, speaking with them regularly. And then eventually it could be like, hey, do you think we should formalize this? Right? Like, that's the approach it should take. Yes, you shouldn't be signing up to somebody who's not going to give you their first piece of advice until you sign away some equity. That's not the way to go.
Yeah. You don't want that person.
Yeah.
Because if it's all transactional, it's going to suck.
Yeah,
and they're
sure.
probably not a good person.
Mm-hmm. All right, so these were some awesome questions from everybody. Thank you. Just as a final closing note, Madeline, you've been working in not only startups, but also large companies, technology companies, and all these types of things for many years now. Any closing thoughts for entrepreneurs in times like this? This is certainly, well, it's the first global pandemic you've seen.
Yeah.
Certainly not the first, economic downturn that you've seen. Any closing thoughts, whether it's related to advisors or not, that you'd like to impart on some of the people online today?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you guys, you gotta, you're going to work hard, but you got to maintain your sanity. And so take care of yourself and maintain your sense of humor, because life is short, right? And, literally you could die tomorrow out in a pandemic. And I've had 2 employees, one of our team members and his husband got sick. They're fine. Another one, his wife and his 2 little girls got sick. They're fine. Very scary stuff. Another friend of her mother passed away. So, this is very serious stuff. But at the end of the day, you got to maintain your sense of humor and your sanity. You are not your job. Your company is not you. And remember, you are you. And likely is your company is going to fail. That's the reality. That's part of being a startup. Most of them fail. Failure is a reality. So don't freak out about that. Don't beat yourself up about it. You're going to have to try really, really hard, and you're going to have to persevere through a lot of shit. But, don't marry the two, because that's when you end up with depression. That's when you end up drinking too much. That's when you end up kind of freaking out. Maintain your sense of humor. Make sure you develop relationships outside of your job and have some fun. And, you only got one life to live. Don't kill yourself because of the work you're doing.
Great advice. As an entrepreneur, it's hard advice to follow.
Yeah, it is. I know it well. That's why I say it to myself all the time.
Yeah.
Every morning, it's RPM, rise, pee, meditate, and then work out, and then your day is gone. Your day starts. And if you don't think you have time to meditate, for 10 minutes a day, everybody, then you need to be meditating for an hour a day. So just take that 10 minutes and do a little breathing, because you can panic. And don't panic. This too will pass. And if you fail, what's the worst? You're going to learn something. If you don't learn something, then that's the true failure, right? You're going to learn much more through failure than you will through success. I've learned a lot more in my failures, and mind you, I've had plenty of them, like plenty. So take a deep breath, and we'll all get through this together.
Yeah, and we'll get through it stronger too, right? That's something where the companies that do survive and do thrive right now are, they're pulling long weeks and long nights, but they're going to come out of this with new revenue streams and new technologies and all of this stuff. Founder Institute has gone totally virtual, right? I mean, obviously, those are things that are going to benefit us and benefit entrepreneurs for a very long time, right?
Yeah.
So, try to look the positives of it.
It levels the playing field with your remote team. We've been slowly, I've got people in Ireland, I've got people in Colorado, I've got people all over the place. And now I've been doing this Monday morning missive. And, I just got feedback from a VP who's in Ireland, and he said, my team loves it because they feel like they're on a, level field with the people that were always in the office, right? Because they always felt like kind of outsiders. Now we're all dispersed and everybody's at home, but I'm doing this to kind of keep the team up to date, and everybody loves it. And think about that as well with the people that you meet. Hey, can I keep you updated? Write it. You're not just writing it for them, you're writing it for yourself, because when you write that down, you're organizing your thoughts, and it's going to be like, oh my God, I haven't done that, and it'll help you remember what to do, because you're so busy doing and so busy is not helpful. What's going to move the goalpost? And so if you summarize what you did that week, you're going to be like, shit, all those things I said I was going to get done, I didn't get done. Damn it. So summarize that. And again, maintain your sense of humor, because we're all going to need it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Madeline. For everybody in the line, we are going to be sending out a video recording of this. Google Madeline Duvas. She does some really cool stuff. Flux.io, Fluxx.io is her current company. And she also mentors at a ton of Founder Institute programs as well. So thank you so much, Madeline.
Absolutely. Super fun, you guys. I wish we were all in a big room together because it's so much more fun. But
yeah.
one of these days, we'll all be able to be together in a big room again.
Yeah, hopefully sooner rather than later. Thanks to everybody that joined in from all around the world. And for more online startup events, check out fi.co/events. All right. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everybody.